Didn't do it.
Can I have your attention for just a second? I do know that many of you are either finishing the entree or to this dessert buffet, but and particularly so I would like to go ahead and at this time formally introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. Congressman Walter Jones is from Farmville, North Carolina, and I've learned not to do anything unless Deb tells me to start. We all set, Deb? Congressman Jones was born in Farmville, North Carolina, which is a small town, eastern North Carolina, about 60 miles east of here. He attended Hargrave Military Academy and North Carolina State University and then received his Bachelor of Science degree from Atlantic Christian College. He was sworn into the U.S. House of Representatives in 1994 after serving 10 years as an elected member of the North Carolina General Assembly. He's now in his third term, and Congressman Jones serves as a member of 3 different House committees: the Armed Services Committee, which is of particular relevance to us tonight, the Resources Committee, and the Banking and Finance Services Committee. Congressman Jones' 3rd Congressional District has a very strong military presence, including Seymour Johnson, Cherry Point, most of the major military installations in the state. And he has always had a great interest in the welfare for the veterans, military veterans, and the men and women of the armed forces, whether they be active duty, reserve, or guard, as well as being an outspoken advocate for armed forces personnel. His concern for Vietnam-era veterans led him to introduce the War Crimes Act of 1996, and as I was sharing with the congressman earlier tonight, when you recall the conversation of today, particularly with Scott Stuckey's comments about the different attempts by Congress to put together some statutory accountability for private contractors, and we talked about the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act. Actually, Congressman Jones was the beginning of that when he passed the War Crimes Act of 1996, which creates jurisdiction in the federal courts over individuals who are either the perpetrator or victims of violations of the Geneva Convention and other specific treaties. So that he was really at the forefront of that effort to create jurisdiction and to fill that gap, as we talked about today, created in 1957 when the Supreme Court decided Reed v. Covert. I think more recently, Congressman Jones has called for a discussion and implementation of an exit strategy with regard to the ongoing military operations in Iraq. And as a Republican, and I think he would consider himself, and we consider him a fairly conservative Republican, he has therefore placed himself squarely into the middle of the current public debate, which we talked about today, about what the United States position should be with regard to Iraq in the future. He is a gentleman who is known nationally as well as loved greatly in the state of North Carolina. Even while he's been here tonight, he has been meeting folks from his district and elsewhere who consider him in very high regard, as we all do. It is a tremendous personal pleasure to introduce him simply because way back in the early years when he was working on the War Crimes Act, Judge Everett and I were very pleased and privileged to work with Congressman Jones and his staff to try to help in any way we could in the implementation of that particular piece of legislation, and also we've had the privilege of working with him in the years after that on many other potential legislative acts. So, Congressman Jones, it's a great privilege and pleasure to welcome you to our conference, and back to Duke.
Scott, thank you very much, and it is an honor for me as well as my staffer, William Moore, who's from the Greenville office, to be with you tonight. And Before I begin my remarks, and I will couch this to about 22 minutes, and Josh told me if I went to 23, you're going to bring me down. So 22 minutes. But I would not have been able to, I don't want to take too much time talking about this, but the War Crimes Act of 1995-96 would never have happened without Judge Everett and Scott. I am not an attorney. I do not apologize for that. But I am a man who loves the Bible and the Constitution, the best I understand the Constitution. But that would never have happened, and it needed to happen because a man who spent 6.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton brought that to my attention. And I've always said, without being embarrassed by saying this, God gave me a bigger heart than brain, but I will take the heart. And because of that heart, I pursued that legislation with the help of Judge Everett and Scott, and it did become the law of the land, and it needed to happen. And because of time, I will not go into more detail than that. I want tonight to tell you that I'm honored and humbled to be here. 3 weeks ago, 3 Republicans, Ron Paul from Texas, who did not vote for the resolution to give the President the authority to commit troops to Iraq, Wayne Gilchrist from Maryland, a Vietnam veteran Marine who was wounded in Vietnam, who did vote to give the authority to the President, and myself had a news conference. We were in the Cannon Building 121. It's a small room, but it was full with those from Bloomberg, AP, Washington Post, NBC, ABC, and also CNN. And I'm going to tell you tonight how I started my comments, because this is going to lead me to my main discussion tonight. I said, I will die one day, and I hope that when I see my Lord and Savior, He'll be sitting on the throne, and He will look me in the eyes, and He will say, Walter, you are welcome to my kingdom because you wanted my people to know the truth. And that's why I thank you, Scott, for the invitation to be here tonight to talk for just a few minutes. Before we voted to send the troops or give the authority to the President of the United States, I said to my Chief of Staff, Glenn Downs, Glenn, I don't feel good about this. I went to every classified briefings that all members of Congress had, and Scott said in the introduction, I'm on the Armed Services Committee. And yet, before I cast my vote, I did not feel good about it. And yet, I did cast my vote to give the President the authority to commit troops to Iraq. Afghanistan, absolutely. Bin Laden, absolutely. But Iraq, I didn't feel good about it. So I cast my vote to give the authority to the President. As God would have it, in April of 2003, I believe it's 2003, I got a call from Elton Gallagher, who's a congressman from California. He said, Walter, I've had a constituent killed at Fallujah, a Marine, Michael Bitts. He left a wife and 3 children, twins that he will never know. They were born 1 month after he was deployed. Will you call her and help her? Her mother is visiting from Australia, and they need to have the visa extended because of 3 children and the husband not coming back. So I called Janina Bitts, and I said, Ms. Bitts, my heart aches, but I don't know what to say to you, but what can we do to help you with your mom? And she told me, she's very, very wonderful, fine lady. She's remarried to a Marine. And at that time, she said, Congressman, if you can help us with the visa, my mom stay here a little bit longer, it would help us. So we were able to help. In fact, the lady that handles my immigration issues is named Deborah Marm. Her husband, Joe Marm, received the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. They're wonderful people. About a week later, I get a call from my staff in Washington, D.C., and they're saying, Congressman, Michael's body has been returned and there will be a funeral at Camp Lejeune on Saturday. This was Thursday afternoon. I said, John, I don't know. I've got a meeting with tobacco farmers, and if any of you are from North Carolina, you know the history of tobacco buyouts. I said, I put this off for 3 weeks. Let me think about it, and I swear to you, God said, Walter, you're going. I called him back within 5 minutes, and I said, John, call the Marine Corps and tell them when I get to Camp Lejeune just to show me where to go for Michael Bitts' funeral. I want you to imagine this. It's a beautiful day in April, just like today is April, and it's a beautiful day. The captain meets me at the parking lot after the Marine MPs have left. The captain comes to my car and he says, Congressman, I'm here to escort you to the service. The service is under a tent looking at the beautiful river that flows outside of Camp Lejeune with a screen fence. And there are 2 young Marines there at parade rest in full dress uniform and an absolutely perfect looking gunny sergeant. About 6'2", probably Hispanic. They sit me beside Mrs. Bitts, and I don't know what to say to her. I'm crying already. I have my sunglasses on, and tears are coming down my eyes, out of my eyes, excuse me. I said, Ms. Bitts, I don't know what to say to you, but we in Congress appreciate your gift. We're 2 people down from her, not the twins, they're home with her mother, but the little boy named Joshua, and he's sitting in a little stroller, and there's a reason I've got to share this with you before I get into the main part of my talk. The first order is the gunny sergeant brings the folded flag to the wife, and he leans over and he says something. I was not trying to listen. I did not know what he said. She accepts the flag. Then he moves to the right of the little boy, Joshua, in the stroller. The first order is the Navy chaplain reads several verses. And then the preacher, the Baptist minister, gets up and he talks about Janina and Michael, that they were strong in their faith. Young, happy married couple, loved the Lord, loved each other. Then he finishes, and she gets up and reads the last letter Michael wrote her. And because of my faith and my love of Jesus Christ in my life, she gave me a copy of her letter that she received from Michael. I am very respectful of his love of his wife in the 3 pages. But I want to share 3 parts of his letter to you tonight, because I want you to understand my position on the issue of Iraq in just a couple of minutes. This was written on 17 March 2003, and he was killed just 2 or 3 days later. And I have chosen these parts of the letter, and with her permission, I'm coming home to you, but I cannot say what the good Lord has in store for me. I just pray that I come home safe to you. God has something for me to do. I don't know what it is yet, but I pray he gives me the strength, the courage for whatever it is. Only God can make me safe. He will decide, or should I say, he knows when my time is. I'm going to go for now until the next time we meet, on the phone, through the mail, in person, or in heaven. I love you so much. Love always, your truly devoted husband, Michael. I could shed a tear tonight when I read that to you. I did shed tears when she read it word for word, 3 pages of love. God did give him the strength, because months later, his family received the Silver Star for his service to his fellow man before he was killed. I share that with you because in driving back to my home in Farmville, which is 72 miles from Jacksonville, Camp Lejeune, I asked God, what am I supposed to take from this? I am so emotional that I don't know how to accept this gift of a life for freedom, for service to this nation. Then it came to me. I have signed over 5,000 letters to families in America. I don't tell you this tonight to impress you, but to tell you that my heart ached so bad that I wanted the families to know that I cared. And part of that letter, I will tell you that God has worked in so many ways, Scott, in my life, that before the Iraq War, I saw a letter that Franklin Delano Roosevelt wrote to the families in World War II. And I asked my friend John Montgomery, the VA in Winston-Salem, if I could copy it. I did not know why. But this is the second part of a 2-page letter. I signed both pages. Mr. Roosevelt said to the families, he stands in the unbroken line of patriots who have dared to die, that freedom might live and grow and increase its blessings. Freedom lives, and through it, he lives in a way that humbles the undertakings of most men. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I share that to get to this point. I do not believe that the intelligence justified going into Iraq. And I resent that I gave my vote to send the troops to Iraq. I'm not going to take your time tonight to read all the quotes from Mr. Bush about, well, he's got this weapon and he's got that weapon, or Secretary Rumsfeld or Vice President Cheney. Sometimes I don't know who's in charge in Washington, to be honest with you. I guess that was pretty evident. Then I read in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, Bush was set on path to war, British memo says. David Manning says that they even talked about taking a surveillance plane and painting it like a UN colors and shooting it down. Because I do believe, and I have promised my Lord, that I will never send his child to die for this country in war unless it is verified. And this was not verified. I have spoken since I put the joint resolution, HJ Resolution 55, in with Dennis Kucinich, Neil Abercrombie, Ron Paul, and Walter Jones. And I took a lot of heat in my district because I did it, but I did it because it was the right thing to do, because as I said to you earlier, America will never survive without the truth. It will never survive. I asked General Zinni. I read his book, Battle Ready, with Tom Clancy. He came in. He's a very impressive man. I said, General, did we have to go into Iraq? He said, no. He said, we had Saddam contained. If you don't know General Zinni, he was a Central Command commander for 3 years, SITCOM for 3 years. And I'll put him up against anybody. He said, Congressman, he was in a box and he was contained. He said, I was in daily contact when necessary with Richard Butler, UN inspector. He said, think about it, I had 23,000 coalition troops. He said, did Saddam want nuclear weapons? Absolutely. Did he have them? No. Did he want chemical weapons? Yes. But did he have it? No. What he had left over in the canisters from the Desert Storm War had degraded. They couldn't be used. He said, think about it, Congressman. For 12 years we flew over the no-fly zone. He never shot the paint off of the planes. Not even shot a plane down. He never shot the paint off the plane. Now, I am no military expert. There's some here today and to be here tomorrow, but I'm not. But remember, I had the responsibility, based on the Constitution, to commit children to die for this country. Let me reiterate, Afghanistan, yes. Bin Laden, yes. But Iraq, my heart has ached, quite frankly. So happens, and I'm getting down toward the end, Scott. My daughter, shortly after the funeral of Michael Bitts, and I've been to other funerals, I've been to wakes, I've been not to as many as some of my colleagues, but I've been to 5, 6, or 7. And I've cried at every one of them. My daughter gave me the book tape, Pretext for War, by James Bamford. You can like James Bamford or not like James Bamford. He wrote the book Puzzle Palace. I didn't read that book. I listened to this tape for 2 months, driving back and forth to Washington, to Farmville. Every day I listened to it, on the weekends going back and forth. I bought the book so I could highlight parts of it. Ron Paul, who I mentioned earlier, did not vote for this resolution. I asked Ron if he would have lunch with me with James Bamford. I did not know Mr. Bamford, but I wanted to have lunch with him. I wanted to ask him questions. I had highlighted the book just like college days. Turned down the pages to show him what did you mean here, what did you mean there. The Rendon Group is a group that in 2 years, $84,000 in contracts from the Department of Defense. $84,000. And I could not get copies of the actual contract. In fact, the reason I got this was after I asked Secretary Rumsfeld last February of 2005, Mr. Secretary, tell me about the Counterterrorism Evaluation Group headed by David Wormser. And he looks at me like, what? Mr. Secretary, tell me about the relationship between the Department of Defense and the Rendon Group. What? I said, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask that we get in writing from the Secretary an explanation of the Counterterrorism Evaluation Group and also an explanation of the business relationship with the Rendon Group. Ladies and gentlemen, that was in February. In August, I got a paragraph. When I left that hearing in February, I had the Knight Ridder reporters to come out and ask me, why did you ask those questions? And I said, well, because of some research, and that was pretty much true, Scott. They said, we go on the internet and you can get about 26 pages. Let me tell you, this is not on the internet anymore. And I will tell you, very learned people, and I'm probably the only one here tonight that's not learned, but I will tell you that it is against the law of this country to create any type of campaign that is a propaganda type of campaign. It's called the Smith-Mundt legislation, that you cannot use the taxpayers' money to create a propaganda campaign to sell the American people. And when you look at the Office of Special Plans under Secretary Rumsfeld, Douglas Feith, Richard Pearl, and the neoconservatives that took the intelligence from CIA and cherry-picked what they were going to send forward. That is a violation of the Constitution, in my humble opinion. And I will tell you tonight, in addition to General Zinni, I have met with Paul Pillar, 31 years with the CIA. I have met with Karen Kotowski, Colonel in the United States Air Force. And I have met with Larry Wilkerson, Lieutenant Colonel, with Colin Powell, because I want to know the truth. I'm not preaching to you. I know I sound like it, but I'm passionate about this. Because kids are dying. I was at Walter Reed 3 weeks ago. 3 kids, the one from eastern North Carolina, Washington, paralyzed from his waist down. 23 years old, will never walk again. The other young man, 23, from Ohio, from above his knee on his right leg down, is gone. The other kid from New Mexico shot through the helmet in the head. He can't talk to me. His mom said, "Eric, this is a congressman. He's come to see you." And he goes, he can't speak. We should never send a kid to war for this country unless we constitutionally know it's the right thing to do. And I will tell you, when the truth will come out, whether I'm responsible for it or not. It will come out. And I will tell you, I'm going to begin to close right now, but I will tell you that I know that as a member of Congress, that the intelligence that was given to me and the American people had not been verified. And no one should ever have to send a kid to war unless we know that the justification has been checked and rechecked and verified. I don't think I can add a whole lot to this intellectual meeting, but I will tell you, Scott, that I have asked for an investigation. I cannot tell you any more than that tonight, because I want the truth to come out. I want the American people to know. And I would say this, I am a Republican. Scott introduced me as a Republican. I am proud to be a Republican. But whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat, this country will never survive unless those of you who are trained to protect the Constitution demand of those of us in office, be attorneys or non-attorneys, to demand the honest truth be told. And my wife told me when I told about this thing, she said, "Well, you might end up in the Potomac." I said, "Joanne, I might, but you know what? The Lord will dry me off and welcome me to His kingdom." This is my close. I ask God to please bless our men and women in uniform. And I ask God to please bless the families of our men and women in uniform. And I ask God in His loving arms to hold the families who've given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I ask God to please bless you and your families. I ask God to please give strength, guidance, and wisdom to the Senate and the House in Washington, D.C., that we will do what is right and demand the truth. And I ask God to please give wisdom and strength to President Bush. And 3 times I ask God, please, God, please, God, please, bless America. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Jones. And I think it's obvious that you highlighted several times that you are a Republican, the President's party. And it's obvious also that you have a heartfelt belief in everything you said tonight. And it's something that many of us in conferences such as this can talk in theory and talk about the law, but it all comes down to the life of a young man or a young woman on the battlefield. Congressman Jones has said that he'll take some questions for a while, so we'll entertain any questions or comments you might have. Again, we don't have the microphones here, so if you have a question or comment, if you would stand, identify yourself, speak as loudly as you can, because we're trying to have a a transcript of the entire proceedings. Anybody? Dick?
Congressman, I'm Dick Conan. I teach military history at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Yes,
When
sir.
you ask your Republican colleagues to have hearings on these subjects, what are the reasons they tell you they won't do that?
Sir, what's discouraged me about my own party is that we're not willing to ask the tough questions and ask for the truth. The reason we signed, I appreciate you asking that question for several reasons, but this one primarily. The reason we did the news conference 3 weeks ago with Ron Paul and Wayne Gilchrist and myself was hopefully when members of Congress went back home for 2 weeks, there are some national groups that are trying to help us have this debate. We have never had a debate since we debated giving the president the authority to send troops into Iraq. The one with John Murtha, in fact, the Democrats gave me 2.5 minutes on the floor. I was offended that my party tried to embarrass John Murtha. He's a hero. But I will tell you that we have not on the House side, I can't speak for the Senate, Scott, but we on the House side have not had more than an hour and 20 minutes since the initial debate on sending the troops to Iraq. And we think with this discharge petition that we signed, that's the reason we had the news conference. I kind of got away from that. But we had the news conference for this reason. I went to the parliamentarian. If we can get enough members to sign the discharge petition, we can have up to 17 hours on the floor of the House to debate the discharge petition to discharge. The petition would be H.J. 55, but the debate would be, and what we're trying to say to the members of Congress, particularly on the Republican side, is if you're for being in Iraq, if you want to be there for 100 more years, if you want to put the draft back in, get on the floor and talk about it. We have not had one debate over an hour since the troops have been there almost 3 years now. And I don't know, I would tell you this, I guess I'm more of an independent Republican than a Republican. But to me, anyone that's got a tough reelection, and particularly if they're from the Northeast or the Midwest or even the Southwest, and it's beginning to be that way in North Carolina now, as you've seen some poll numbers recently. This is an issue. We will begin in the month of May, this was in the Washington Post, we'll be spending $10 billion a month in Iraq. This country is $300 billion since we went to Iraq. We are, when I went to Congress in 1995 with Newt Gingrich as the majority, we were roughly $4.9 trillion in debt. We're now $8.3 trillion in debt, and we're about to bankrupt the next generation. We cannot afford to police this world. If it's a threat to our national security, let's defend this country. If we're going to invade another country to create a democracy where, if you know the history, and I'm not an expert in history, but I do have a basic understanding of the Middle East, it's a different culture, they're different people. Anyway, did I give you an answer, I hope?
Another comment. Yes, Art.
Art Harris, I was embedded with a unit that was with Michael Viz.
No.
Really? Second Marines, Camp Lejeune, Charlie Company. They lost 18 guys in 4 hours in Nasiriyah from a friendly fire. Amazing kids. It's a very moved by your comments.
Thank you, sir.
What investigative tools, Congressman, have you thought about marshaling GAO? Could you talk a little bit about what you have in mind?
Yes, sir. I can tell you up to a point. I'm very fond of Chuck Hagel. He was willing to speak out early on this issue, and I've had a chance to meet with him a couple times, but he's not part of what I'm doing, so don't ask me why I brought that up. But I like Chuck Hagel. That's the reason I brought it up. I have asked the proper agency to investigate my concerns about a violation of federal law. We have had 2 meetings, and the third took place the week before we broke for Easter. And they brought 5 auditors in that meeting. and they have told us that there will be 70 people that they're going to talk with. All I really want, and I'll be repetitious for one moment, I want the people to know the truth. But I am not going to let this go, and it could be a thing that I just know that the American people are waiting for the truth to come out on this. And it could be that embarrasses my party. But this is not about party. This is about the American people. And to me, that's what matters.
Jackie.
Jackie North, NPR. I mean, you're talking about investigations, you're talking about discussions, you're talking about pre-war intelligence. What is it in real practical terms that you're looking for? Do you want us to get out of there? Do you want the truth to come out, okay, the pre-war intelligence is manipulated or abandoned? What is it at the end game that you're looking for?
Well, Jackie, this is a fair question. Let me tell you, I want my conscience to feel good about what I did. And if I was given intelligence that had not been verified to say he's got weapons of mass destruction, he didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. But the point is, why should members of Congress cast a vote to give the authority unless we verify the intelligence to say we know that he has them? That was not done. And there was let me tell you, the Rendon group got Judith Miller, the meeting with Shalaby in Thailand. That the American people, in my opinion, this might not be able to be proven, but the American people were duped with false intelligence, and that should not be able to stand without somebody answering for it.
Yes.
I'm John Schmidt. I'm a lawyer from Chicago. Are you saying that because the intelligence was wrong when we went in, we should now get out? And if you're not saying that, what are you saying we should be doing now in Iraq?
Well, I think that John Murtha's idea of taking the troops out of the hot zones, and I will tell you, I don't think, I mean, if we want to stay there to bankrupt the next generation, which we're doing a pretty good job right now, if we want to stay there for 10 or 15 more years, then it's like I said in the personnel committee, you better start talking about the draft, because our men and women are beginning to understand that this is not the war that we need to commit all of the resources, both financially and, more important, the treasure of our young men and women. So somebody smarter than I'm not the President of the United States. Of course, I'm not sure, but never mind. I'm not the President of the United States. But somebody up at that level should be able to figure this thing out. I'm just a lowly congressman. But I tell you this, that I don't think America will survive as a great nation if we allow any administration not to give the American people the truth to justify the commitment of our children.
Andy?
Andy McCarthy, I'm wondering, you're talking about verifying the intelligence. I wonder what you mean by that. For example, we have no idea now how far along Iranians sort of getting nuclear weapons, whether they have them, whether it'll take 10 years, whether it'll take 10 minutes, or something in between. Are you saying that the United States can't take action in its national defense unless it knows for a certainty what the intelligence suggests?
Andy, I don't speak very well, but let me try to make it again. The neoconservatives, have you ever heard the name Douglas Feith? Richard Pearl? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. These people were given a position within the Department of Defense shortly after George Bush went into office. It's going to come out, it's coming out now, that certain people within certain positions in the Department of Defense cherry-pick the intelligence coming out of the CIA. My point of all that is this should not happen. If it does happen, let the American people know, let the American people make the decision. How in the world can anybody look at the poll numbers for George Bush at 32% and think that the American people have any confidence? I'm not saying you do, but the point is, I'm not talking about Iran tonight. I'm talking about Iraq. I'm talking about the fact, no, but the point is, if you have a weakness or a flaw in a system, that created the justification to go to war, it needs to be exposed. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Let me go ahead and take one more question or comment. Did I have one in the back? Okay, yes.
Congressman, as we look at this situation, and I really appreciate the courage of your position, how should we think about remedying this, not now? What can we think about in the future in order to avoid the kinds of things that you're suggesting happen at this point in time as we went to war in Iraq? Are there things we can do, particularly from the perspective of Congress, where even if it doesn't declare war, it's at least asked to vote a resolution in favor of use of force?
I can only speak for myself, and obviously you asked me the question. If we have any classified briefings, which I and Ron Paul have requested of the Speaker of the House as soon as we go back on the issue of Iran, I will be able, in a classified setting, to ask questions that I did not ask for the buildup in Iraq. I've spoken to a student here tonight. I'm not a lawyer. I don't apologize. I said that earlier, but I do listen. I'm a great listener. There's a young man here tonight that we met. We've had a conversation with. There's certain things that I think Congress can do that it has not done. But when you really come down to it, and I know we've got some people here that work on the Senate side, and I'm not talking about the Senate, Scott, but too many times it's just like the leave no child behind. I'm going to get to a point very quickly. If that had been Bill Clinton saying, I want to expand the Federal Department of Education, it would never even gotten out of a committee. We pushed that bill. I didn't vote for it. We pushed it, and it became the law of the land. I didn't vote for the Medicare prescription drug bill. But you know what they told me? The Speaker of the House, who I love and respect, Walter, the President and I need you to vote for this bill. I said, it's not the right thing to do. I didn't vote for it. So the point I'm getting away from, I'm coming back just 1 second. The point is that the Congress, even when it's your own president, Democrat or Republican, don't be a rubber stamp. And I'm not saying every member of the House who's a Republican was a rubber stamp. I'm not trying to say that. But because it was our president, that we cannot be as challenging as we should be. And I just think that the American people are showing their disdain, their disappointment. You look at these poll numbers, I mean, it's worse now than it was prior to 1994. Scott, thank you.
Walter, let me just offer an observation. All of us in this room, of course, have been reading, as you have, about stories of lobbyists.
We didn't talk about that.
No, we're not going to. Lobbyists and the buying of votes. I'd suggest that whether the folks in this room agree with you or disagree with you, I think one thing is certain, that you represent a member of Congress who feels very deeply about this country, and particularly with the heavy military constituency that you have, a base that General Sanborn used to be at Seymour Johnson, that there is something very right about the fact that when you feel as strongly as you do, you are willing to speak out, even as a Republican. And whatever goes forth from here, at least you and your colleagues on the Hill are doing what I think this Constitution wanted you to do, which is to have an open and active debate on the issues and to engage the executive department before we do go to war, one way or the other. So, Congressman, let me thank you for joining us tonight and being a part.
Thank you. That was very kind, Scott. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, obviously we're going to be reconvening tomorrow morning back in the Janine Auditorium. We have 3 wonderful panels to go tomorrow. We also have, of course, as you know, as our keynote luncheon speaker, the just retired Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Richard Myers, who will be speaking to us. I've asked him to address the question of, with the heavy operations tempo over the last number of years in Southwest Asia and Afghanistan and Iraq, what is the current state of readiness of our armed forces? And we talk about Iran, we talk about other challenges to the United States, which the Congress must look at and debate. But what about our armed forces? And I think of no one more knowledgeable of that than the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Myers. So he'll be here with us at lunch tomorrow, but we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much.